I mentioned just a minute ago, we've been having worked around in EDDMapS for a while. A lot of the agricultural groups working with us were getting into it because they wanted some way to organize some of their efforts, and we didn't have a great way to do that for some of what EDDMapS was providing. So we reworked things to make sure we had the ability to provide communications, group things together, and make a little more cohesive experience for folks. A lot of what our group does is helping have partnerships, do training, and provide information technology so the biologists really don't have to. Biologists are wonderful people. Many of them should not be database administrators, have to come up with data schemas. It'd be, it's probably easier just to let them actually use their expertise for what they were trained in. And so we take a lot of work, or a lot of effort into supporting our partners from behind the scenes. And this is where we were watching a lot of different groups come up with the same issues for, I want to organize people, I want to help get them headed towards a direction of reporting giant hogweed or Palmer amaranth or kudzu bug or whatever the latest invasive is. You want to have some on the ground, very local operations and build a community project around trying to know where these things are and manage them. So in supporting our partners from behind the scenes, the project concept started to come out of how do people have a project to organize what's going on. The term project is a very unfortunate term because it's generic and a lot of people have used it. So as we've been rolling this out, we've had folks say, oh, a project, it must be following the same concepts as all these other groups use, and each group uses it differently. So we figured we'd add in a little what a project is and isn't. For us, a project is a way to have data management, to allow someone to look at what records they want to include in a particular area and know, to that data. It doesn't go to the level of data access that someone like a state regulator goes to or a data verifier. Those folks that can really see just about anything they want for a given subject. But it does give you more a view of the unreviewed data. It gives you a view of some of the actual locations because with that project, the people reporting into it know what's going on and who's going to see what. We're always trying to balance between what we have to do to protect regulatory interests because reporting some of these invasive species could cause some significant issues for trade or other circumstances for management versus getting people out there and just reporting everything, and as they report, it goes up. There's a happy middle between those two, and we're constantly working to balance that. Where it gets more into where I'm feeling the project's going is a group communication and engagement tool. You're going to try to have a citizen science project or a community project or an area-wide project. You have certain people that need to know when information's coming in. People are sending in reports, just that reports are coming in so that they can continue to promote things on social media. They can reach out to folks and say, hey, great to see you guys reporting in this area. Thank you for doing it. Or, right now we're coming up on the season where we're expecting to see significant flowering or we expect to see emergence. So if you're going to go out and look, now's the time to look. It's helping to wrangle those people around efforts you want to see in the field for helping get more reports and data in. It also helps connect projects with verifiers and experts. And in the EDDMapS world of things, a verifier is a person who has had training or experience that knows pretty definitively that yes, this is what the species is. we aren't going with models that look at, well, if enough people say it is what it is, then that we'll go ahead and release that data. That's still a useful model for some groups, but for the purpose of EDDMapS, we can't rely on that. We want that extra level of verification from people who have been vetted to make sure they know what they're looking at. And experts are also these others that they've said, you know what, any report that you send in, we can trust that it's going to be something that is what you said it was. It's just a matter of data quality. Not that we think the people aren't qualified or aren't well-intentioned or anything else, but when your decisions are based off of vetted data, it really helps to, direct management better. And we're also seeing it as a way to encourage collaboration between groups. Because data sits within one project, but once it's reviewed, other people can see it, I can revisit a record from anyone else's project. One of the best examples we have of this right now is with the Morton Arboretum working on monitoring for spotted lanternfly. They have the Tree of Heaven locations. They have selected those and they've said, go check the Tree of Heaven and tell us if you see spotted lanternfly. And while you're there, would you mind taking a look at the Tree of Heaven and let them know if the tree is still there or if it's gone, you don't see it in the area. It's revisiting another project's data and showing that people, even though they're looking at different main focus, still can have some overlapping concerns and they can help each other out. So it's a nice way that we've been trying to tie different groups together based on either subject matter or geography. What a project isn't. We have a different concept in the system for a data set. A data set can contain records from multiple projects, and a record can be in any number of data sets. So that's a bit of a different concept. Some groups with project, a record can be in as many projects as you like. Not so much for us. For us, that record needs a home. It needs the people who are responsible for bringing that data in and doing some of the curation of what data is available. It's also not meant to be the county dashboard for a county weed coordinator. We've already built that functionality into the EDDMapS dashboard. So we're still, getting some interest from folks. They're trying to figure out how projects fit into their world. And so these are starting to provide some guidelines of how they're going to be used. I will add that these are concepts that we are continuing to evolve as people come to us with their use cases. Folks come to us all the time and say, all right, I see where you're going with this. I see why it works for some people. Here's my use case and what I'd like to do with it. And we're starting to get to the point that we're going to have some case studies to show people, all right, here was their situation, how they used EDDMapS, whether it was projects or any of the other tools, to help other folks be able to follow those same paths. We go out of our way to make things fit with the workflow that every group wants to work with, which means there's a lot of different options for how you can set things up. And sometimes it does require some conversation, some consulting to know exactly where to go. So I do see we've had other folks join us while I was going through the intro into projects. I'll just reiterate, if you've got questions, go ahead and throw them into the Q&A box. That will make sure that we actually do get to those questions by the time office hours are over. We cover all the things you're looking for. Rather than go through more PowerPoint, which I know you all love PowerPoint, we're going to go to live demo of going through, and I'm going to go ahead and start off that I've got a project I want to set up. There are many different cooperative and invasive species management areas in the United States, groups that have come together and saying, yeah, they're a problem. We want to start getting volunteers together to go out and do surveys, pull together information, and know where it is. And we'd really like to be able to unify that effort by using EDDMapS for the reporting and communication. So that's where this particular example is starting off. I'm using a testing account of mine, so all this you see is testing user. This is just like any other person with no grand permissions in the system. So this project I'm going to create is the Coastal Georgia SYSMA. And this is actually a group that exists. They have a number of different counties in Georgia on the coast, and they're focusing on a set list of species. They've got a pretty good description for their group. And this is where I encourage anyone who set up a project, if some of the folks on here already have a project, look at your description and try to make sure it has some key characters in there for people to know what the heck you're talking about. Why should I join your project? In this case, I can see that we're talking about Camden, Glenn, McIntosh, Liberty, Bryan, Chatham, Effingham, Long, Wayne, Bradley, and Charlton counties. If someone's going to join your project, they may care that it's in their area, and they may care what species you're going to be looking at. So provide some of that information in the description just to help give people a better idea of what you're working on. It's also nice when the name of your project is actually descriptive. Coastal Georgia SYSMA works out pretty well. We've been looking at some of the projects people have set up so far. Some of them, the acronyms are thick and heavy. And it's fun knowing whether or not I would want to be part of that project or something I would want to join. This group does happen to actually have a website, Coastal Georgia SYSMA, so we go ahead and put that in there. And I'm going to say, yes, this is a project that, well, I'll hold off on making it public. Making a project public means that when I go to explore projects, I can find it in the listing. There's plenty of times where folks want to set up a project, have a private set of members that are going to help contribute data, and they're not wanting everyone in the world to know about that. And that's fine. We work with that as well. And for the admin for this project, I'm going to go ahead and set myself just to get things started and rolling here. We have just added, as of earlier today, the ability to start selecting the geography for your particular project. Where this is going to come in handy is if you're looking at exploring our projects, which is another new page you'll be seeing in just a minute. You want to be able to easily filter down to where a certain project or what projects are active in an area. This is that data that the project's working off of. You can see I was adding in multiple counties in this case. Later on, I'll go in and finish adding the rest of the counties in, but it's just providing some of the data that would be needed for that exploring projects. We also have in here the subjects or the taxa that you're looking to look for. I'm just going to pick up a few here. I'm going to pick up some kudzu because who doesn't like tracking kudzu? I'll go ahead and pick up some kudzu bug, which the people at ag are concerned about because it goes on to soybean and can cause yield losses. And just because I do like to test things, I'm going to go ahead and add the test record subject. We offer the test record to everybody so that they can send in reports, see what happens, kick the tires on the system without having to worry about, I just alerted the state plant regulatory officer that the creeping crud has arrived in my state. So we provide test subjects to help people out with that. So I filled this all out. I go ahead and add my project. It's confirming that yes, my project has been added. So now if I go into my dashboard and I look under the projects I have, here is the Coastal Georgia SYSMA. I did mention earlier the whole Explore Projects concept. This is the new page that has been set up for exploring projects. So I can see the different projects that are in here and the description they have. I can do some searching to filter this down to what I'm looking for. So if I want to know who's currently working on giant hogweed, I can select that, and there's 3 projects already that have come up around giant hogweed. If I want to know more about any of these projects, I can click on it. It opens up in a new tab to show me more details about that project and what they're doing. So if I would have made the Coastal Georgia, you would have seen that show up in there. I didn't. That's fine. We often encourage people to first go in, set up your project, get all your settings the way you like, then let people know you exist. It helps keep you off the list until you're ready for people to know about you. Going back then, I've got my project set up. Here it is for Coastal Georgia SYSMA. If I wanted to edit any of the settings I just did, I come over to Manage Project. Here's all the information I could want to be able to go in and continue to edit that information. The first thing I recommend most folks to go into after they've got their project set up is their brand. You're planning to be in contact with people. They want to know who you are. They want to identify email that comes to them is about you or about your project. So this is where you start applying brand to help identify that. So in this particular case, I'm going to start off, I've got a logo I'd like to use, and I'll just go ahead and save this because the preview is only going to be displayed after I save. So here's the basic email template that you've just set up by hitting save and adding a logo. I've got the logo on top, whatever the heck the message is going to be, whether that's me sending an email to everyone in the group saying, here's this new effort, whether it is a notification that new records have been added, whether it's a notification of records being moved from the project. All the notifications from this project are going to carry this brand around it. So I'm already seeing that, that's nice, but I like a little bit of color in my projects. So I'm going to go ahead and red's a little bit alarming. I'm going to go ahead with some blue. We already have the URL for the project, but I also have a Facebook page I'm going to throw in there. Rebecca Wallace is set as default signature on the bottom of all of these emails. That's lovely, but she's not the person I want on the signature for mine. That would be Eamon Leonard. I can put whatever contact information I choose to have down there for him. So I can save this again. I get another preview showing me, okay, there's my colors. I've changed up my signature. Here's links to my Facebook, to my website. If you have Twitter, Instagram, other feeds, you can provide all that in there. This is, again, all about the brand for your particular project, so that when someone gets an email from you, they go, yes, okay, I recognize this as being official from that project. We do also ask that people include in their footer of their emails a location of where your organization is actually located. The reason for this is to comply with the federal CAN-SPAM Acts. Yes, you are not selling anything through these emails. However, we still want to be a little proactive in making sure we're not violating different privacy policies and rules for sending email. Some of them may appear as marketing, and we just want to make sure we're covering all of our bases. So on the bottom of these, what you can't see, because this is just a preview email, there's always an unsubscribe link. You've got the location of the group, added to the footer saying where they're from. These are all just requirements to keep you in compliance with federal laws about not spamming people and sending them garbage. I know I get enough garbage in my email, so I can appreciate the fact that this exists. So that's setting up your brand. Once that's set up, now any email going out is going to end up carrying that with it. So let me go over to, I've got my project set up, I've got my brand, I want to manage some users because it's not just about me. I want to have more people in here. This is a lookup that lets you search through the first name, last name, and organization of anyone who happens to be in the system. That's nice, but that can be a lot to go through. And for every single person that shows up, type them in, look them up, and then try to make sure, well, is that actually Eric Rebeck's email address or is that not? If you do know that's someone's account, you can go ahead and add them and make them an administrator or whatever role you wish for them. I'm all about a little easier. So we do have this invite users option. I can take an entire list of people that I have a mailing list or however that I got the list. These are people I know should be involved in this project. I paste their emails in here and I'm going to send them an invite to this project. Going back to manage users, I can see I've invited a number of folks to join this project. Looking at my own email, because I was one of the people I just sent that to, here is what the email looks like. Hey, you've been asked to be part of this project. To accept it, please go here. And then we've got a disclaimer telling you what it means to be part of a project. That if I put records in there, they're going to know it was me. If the records get reviewed and are available, they're going to see locations. Being part of the project means that there's extra information that the public doesn't see, but project administrators and others in the project may. When a person gets that email and they normally would just click the link, I have to be careful because I'm currently logged in as somebody else. So here's my personal account. And I was invited to the project, so I'm going to go ahead and this is like clicking that link. I've been invited to join Coastal Georgia SYSMA. I've got the description telling me about this project. So if I had no idea why I was getting this email, hey, here's why this group's doing this. Do you want to accept to be part of this project? I'm going to go ahead and accept because I trust me. So now I'm part of this project. And here I can see what other users are currently in here as part of the project. I am just in as a user. The reason I'm seeing more is because I'm also a system administrator. System admins get special privileges because frequently we will get an email from someone saying, hey, would you please help me? I can't get someone added. Normally they wouldn't see all of this, all of what you're seeing here. So then back to here, this is my testing account once more. I can come in here and see what's been going on. I can see, well, Joe joined my project. He's in there as a user. I can change his role at any time if I need to give him more permissions, less permissions, and work with what things we need to have in there. So just trying to make adding users as easily done as possible because I know how much I hate using these searches. And because anybody can make a project, we didn't feel comfortable putting email address as one of the things that shows up there. We wanted to try to make sure we were keeping things a little more private than that. So the invite users function really helps that out. Once I have users that are part of the project, I then have the ability to send them contact them at any time. This is saying, all right, what group do I actually want to send an email to? And I will switch projects real quick, just because in this case, I could email the administrators. I could do anyone who's ever reported into the project, whether or not they're currently part of the project or not, because people could put data in the project and not be an active member of the organizing committee. People who have signed up for alerts just to know about what's going on in the project or what new data is coming out. So I have some ability to customize exactly what I want to have in here to know who I'm about to email. And it's telling me right here, this email will be sent to however many users. And just like you would do in any other email, I can give it a subject, I can put a message in there, and then I'm going to send that off to the 7 people that have asked to receive or were in that particular list. So pretty straightforward communication aspect of trying to get people engaged, join a project, and keep communication with them. So that's a lot on getting people organized and managing how all this comes together. So currently, I can see from my testing user perspective, there's no data in this project. I just created it, and I haven't opened it up to anybody. So now, how does data get into that project? One way that can happen is when Joe LaForest just joined this project, he can go into another project he has, look at his particular records, and say, all right, you know, that group just started up. I want to send them some additional records. So I'm going to go ahead and send, let's say, these 2 records over to them. I want to move these 2 records because a record can only exist in one project at a time. I want them to be able to see more detail about what's going on with these records, and I want to contribute them into what they're doing. So I've just sent those records over to that project. If I go over back to the testing user, who is just a, pardon the pun, standard old Joe, here I can see these 2 records were just sent in, and I know that they're there. So pretty straightforward. When you're looking at data that you already have submitted up at one point or another, now you've got a way to move them to different projects based on where you want to go. To bring new data in, we're still working on getting it worked into all the possible report forms that are out there. So far in EDDMapS Pro, I can go in and start off by coming into my app settings, and I'm going to refresh my project and my species list. We don't want the phone constantly pinging our server because it will drain users' batteries. So we have this option for them to come in, refresh their list, so that if they've joined new projects, if there are new species that have been added, that's how you get in to know what's new. I'm going to go back to my map, and I'm going to use my location, and I'm going to enter a test record. And it starts off saying, well, the Arkansas Core and IPM program, is that the project you want to send that into? I've got an option, and this is just an oddity, that I'm in multiple projects because I test record everything. Here's the Coastal Georgia SYSMA one. If you're only in 1 or 2 projects looking at a handful of species, that project lookup will automatically be set to the project you wanted because there was only one possible option. I'm a bit of an oddball, as many of you probably know. So that's why I've got more projects showing up there. But it gives me a choice of where I want the data to go to. I can go through, complete the record, say whether it should be private to the public, not disclose my location, select my number of acres I was looking at, the density, because that's what's required for a test record. Save that data. When I get back to where I have good Wi-Fi, I can upload that record and it goes up to our server. So now that's been added into that Coastal Georgia SISMA project. If I'm back over here and I'm the Joe without all the permissions, here's a brand new record, just came in from the phone. The review status is pending. We're still figuring out if it can be automatically verified, what verifiers it needs to go to. It's taking a second for it to run through that process. Once it does, this is going to switch to needing review. That's the first status. It's a new record, and a verifier is going to need to look at that. You can see that with this record, I can't click on this to view details. And we understand that can be a little frustrating for folks that aren't verifiers, or I just got this data in my project. I can see the summary of it. I can't see the rest. For other things like this record, I can see the full detail and go and see all the information about it because it's already been reviewed. If someone is a verifier and does have permission to see unverified data, they can see the full record details just like they normally would. This is where we're treading that line between this could be a regulatory issue, this could be something significant, yet there's people who really want to help. How do we bring them together and allow for some data sharing between the groups and eventually more and more sharing and building of expertise and knowledge and folks in the field? It's something we're still trying to evaluate and work our way through as we're figuring out how this all comes together. And right now you can actually see that switch status. Now it's just unreviewed. So it's still waiting review by somebody. For your projects, you're going to have a lot of knowledgeable people, some of which may be perfectly good to be verifiers. We just haven't expanded the verifier network out there. So we have an option for you here on the side. Request to be a verifier. This gives us, says, all right, are you requesting for yourself or somebody else? If it's somebody else, who are they? And hopefully they know they're about to submit you as a verifier. What's their background? What's their qualifications? This is just to give us something that when we talk to the other verifiers and the other partners in the area, we can say, hey, we've got somebody who wants to be involved. Here's what I know about them. And they'll be in touch just to make sure everyone's on the same board, on the same on board, and are aware of who's looking at the records when they come in. There's generally not territorial disputes. It's just people wanting to be informed before something happens. No one likes surprises unless it's a surprise birthday party. They like those usually, but not surprises for, hey, this showed up, and how did that get verified? So providing information about what taxa someone's going to be looking at, if there's specific things they want to look at, here's what we need to know to be able to verify you as a verifier. It's kind of an odd turn of phrase. So that's a lot of different basics for setting up a project, getting your brand, getting people in, starting to get data in and available, and letting people know that you exist. I do see some questions that I'll go ahead and answer. Do projects extend into Ontario, Canada? Yes. We cover North America pretty well. US and Canada are two of our bigger US user groups. Happy to work with Ontario. can we have a project where participants report the unexpected massive die-off of an invasive species? I would say yes. We're going to have to work on the report form a little bit, because reporting dead things is something that does happen, especially when you're talking about, I believe when you're talking about wildlife, we have a status for already took care of that black and white tegu. They said, hey, I saw it, but we did kill it. So it is possible to do that. It might just take some modification to make sure we're recording the data that's expected when that's coming in. Those statuses are put into the apps, and a little bit of work to get it to be exactly what you'd like. And we can continue to take questions if you have them coming in. We've gone through pretty much the basics of what these projects are and how you'd start using them. It's really pulling people together, getting a better handle on what data is coming in, just to be able to promote monitoring and detection efforts in a given area and have more ownership of it within your local groups. While we're waiting for questions, I will mention that there are some additional webinars or office hours that we will have on features that you've seen some of it pop up as I was going through. That when I went to my account, verifier and expert management showed up. And site-based reporting, because somebody has a trap out there in the field, was in there. The whole idea of publishing forecasts, if you're into publishing forecasts for where something's coming out, is something that's in there. From the ag folks, you can thank them for that. We'll have more detailed webinars on each of these, because there can be a lot that you put in there. We do have a question came in through the chat. Can a private project be made public at any time in its duration? Yes. So it all goes back to, if I go back to my projects and my dashboard of projects and Coastal Georgia SISMA, and I will also, just because I like to right click and open new tabs, here's the current lookup for projects that are here. Some really nice descriptions, some really nice project titles, some that I think not including test in the title of your project is probably a good thing. We don't want to add an approval process on this, but we may, depending on what name starts showing up for projects. If I go to manage my project, this one is currently private. I want it to be public. Okay, so now I look at this page again. Coastal Georgia SISMA right here. Now it's public. People can see it. And if someone wants to explore it, I can request to join the project right here. So this is, once it's public, people can start requesting to join and getting into the project. They can also just send an email to contact administrators and say, hey, I see you're doing this, curious, I want to know more, and just start opening up that dialogue between folks. I'll go back to my project, make that no longer public. When I come back here, refresh the page. Hey, Coastal Georgia SISMA went away. So it's literally that simple, turning on and off a project being seen by the public. A question from Stacy, what's the difference between project areas and monitoring zones? Monitoring zones are a feature we have to turn on for folks to work with, allowing them to draw geographic boundaries, assign users to those geographic areas, and generally with that, using existing data to tell people where to go to revisit other things or monitoring traps. That's a sneak preview of when we have office hours monitoring zones. Project areas, the geographic areas that we set on the project, is just giving someone a general notion of, you said it was in these counties, so people know what projects you're talking about. It's not enforcing it. Some of the data I transferred over was actually for North Carolina. The project folks can come in here at some point when they're managing their records and go, Joe, I appreciate this. Love you like a brother, but I don't want this record. It's outside the scope of where we are. And they can remove the record from their project just to trim down what data they're looking at. So some different ways we play around with that.
And project areas also, Joe, in EDDMapS Pro, there's the concept of project areas as well, which is a little confusing in terms of this with projects, but project areas in EDDMapS Pro currently is really just a way for you to upload a KML file of an area you're working on, so you can have that under your data within EDDMapS Pro, versus monitoring zones, which have to be turned on for a project, and monitoring zones are points where you're going and collecting more information. If that helps clarify that a little bit more. I think that was the context of where that question was coming from.
Yeah. And Patricia can clarify that. Sorry, going off. This is where we sometimes have fun with terminology.
Yeah, we changed. Project areas were originally called my KMLs, and we decided to make it more broad by calling it project area. But then that's where project area within EDDMapS Pro and projects within EDDMapS end up overlapping. And Joe, there's another good question in the chat about data once it's in a project.
Yeah, so does the administrator have the ability to refuse importation of data or review it before it's added? Refuse, yes. That's the remove records. I can go, nah, I don't want that. What we are also sending, and I was waiting for the email to come through to be able to show it. We are sending emails to project admins saying, hey, data moved. Here's a summary of what just happened. And here's a summary of those records. So you know what just happened in your project, if data came in or data came out. So we are providing that so you've got an idea of what's moving around. And it helps to know. You don't want to be surprised of where I have 500 records in here. Where did these all come from? Again, Q&A box. If you've got more questions, throw it there. That makes sure we actually answer it, and other people can see the question after we've answered it.
I do want to point out that you can remove people from your project. Joe touched on that briefly, but you can remove people from your project, and that will it will ask the person removed from the project to move their records out of the project. So when you remove someone from the project, like Joe's showing you, you can tell them why, but then they will get an email saying, hey, you've been removed from this project, with a link to move those records out of the project, so that they can move them on their own into another project that they would be appropriate for.
And in a second, I'll be able to show you that email. Just takes a second for it to come through. Other questions or things that people are interested in?
Just a quick thing. So Mark was asking earlier about a project for essentially reporting damaged plants. On the website, we do have a field in the plants reporting form for damage. You can say damage, yes or no. And it was specifically added for the concept of projects that are looking for potential biocontrol situations going on kind of naturally out in the environment. So that field already does exist, and that could be incorporated into a specific type of monitoring project.
And we have a question. Rebecca, stay on. This one's for you because I know you have a good answer. Stacy asks, I'd like to request to be a verifier, but there may be instances in which I would like to refer a record to someone else for a second look. Is this possible?
So at this exact moment, I think we don't have any way to assign a record for someone else to review, for another verifier to review. When a record comes in to be reviewed, all of the verifiers that fit the parameters for reviewing that record, so the geographic parameters, the taxotype parameters, everyone receives the email, hey, this record came in. When you aren't able to comfortably review a record, maybe it's slightly outside your area of expertise, it's something you've never experienced before, then you can rely on existing other verifiers to review the record, or you can attempt to promote someone else, refer someone else to be a verifier, to add them to that verifier network. And when we add new people to the verifier network, they can see records that already exist and are waiting to be reviewed in the review records page. So anything that comes in before they were a verifier, they can still access to review those records.
Well, and there is a field that if you showed the email to someone or let them see it, Rebecca, I believe there's a field that says who was the identifier on this. So even if you're the one doing the verification and you showed it to someone else, there's still a field to capture that.
Yeah, that is correct. There is a identified by field, and we do know people who are using that. They're a verifier, but maybe a report comes in of something that is outside of their area of expertise, like bamboo or grasses, things like that. And they can seek out help from, say, like a local botanist or herbarium curator, something like that. And they can confer with them on what this species might be. And the person who's actually the verifier can review it and add that this expert is the one who actually identified it.
And just to follow up on the removing of people. So this is the email I just got from my one self, removing my other self.
And yeah, I was gonna say there's the link right there to move your records.
We do have a question from Matthew. Any idea about multiple common names for species as a filter that could apply to searches? Not essential for projects, but helpful to tease apart complex like knotweed. Ooh, Matthew, fun question. I love taxonomy and dealing with names. Yes, there are different ways we've been handling that. And what we currently have in progress, and this will bore some of the people on the call who don't get into taxonomy so much, are providing some more official lookups for the variety of common names that come with any given taxon, and allowing those to be additional options. So if I am adding a species to a project, I could type into here hard maple, which some might know as sugar maple, or rock maple, or whatever that common name is, and it still shows up. In our world, for the system, it's going back to a scientific name. And I encourage people to use scientific names as much as possible, but I know that doesn't work for the general public. They wonder why you're speaking Latin at them. The language died, give it up. But it's how we try to keep up with it. So yes, that is something we're working on getting there. It's not quite as refined as I would like it right now. So something to look for in the future. We do have plenty of time, so if there's additional questions, the Q&A in there. There's one I'll go ahead and answer while people are adding more Q&A. How far from soybean crop does kudzu have to be removed so that kudzu bug is not a risk? Based on what I know of kudzu bug, which is minimal, it's extremely mobile. It also gets on cars and likes to hitchhike. Not that it's eating the car, but it's a comfortable place to stay. It was warm. It was a good time. Here we go. The mobility has been something that's why they haven't explored eradicating kudzu to protect soybean. They also didn't eradicate kudzu to stop soybean rust, which is its alternate host. So based on that, I'm going to say really, really far because it is really mobile. Cute little guy if you're a person that thinks that insects can be cute. Some of us are sick like that.
If you were so inclined, Joe, you could show that spread over time map you have for kudzu to show how quickly it moved across the southeast.
Oh, sure, knowing where we put things. So kudzubug.org, an effort that started up before we had the whole project concept, early days. But you could see it quickly moved in 2009. It was in here in the center section. By 2010, it had spread really well there. Yeah, it moved quickly. Fortunately, Beauveria bassiana, which is a fungus, and a number of parasitoids came in, beat the snot out of it. And now there's actually some questions about, is there still kudzu bug in some of these counties? Because it's not really been too much of an issue here in Georgia anymore. The Great Plains are still a little concerned because they haven't been through its introduction and spread yet. So they're keeping a good eye on that to know what's going on. Little off topic for projects, but hey, good filler while we look for other questions. Another question from Stacy. I'd like to be able to create a record for certain native species. And Chuck's responding to that one. Species list gets to be an interesting thing.
Yeah, and what I was going to type, but I'll just say it instead was, so Stacy, would you consider those native species as pest species, weedy species, or just native species that you're trying to keep a track of? Because there are cases where we are tracking native pest species in different contexts. But we're not really looking for EDDMapS to be a biodiversity tracking system. We're really trying to focus more on invasive species and pest species. But there are some options now to be able to add anything and report more options. So yeah, without knowing all the details, there may be a way for you to do it.
Yeah, and for ag, we track all kinds of things that are native, things they don't know, things that aren't necessarily invasive, but re-emerging as different climates have changed. We also track biocontrols. We track things related to pests and management. So it starts getting fairly diverse, but we do avoid becoming the biodiversity database because there are biodiversity databases. We're far more around directing management and providing actionable information to people that need it to make a difference in an area than wide area naturalist surveys. Yeah, a native insect can cause just as much damage to a crop, which is, I work on the ag side, that's why I keep talking about crops. Damage in the right conditions, and we're more concerned about, you know, what people are looking with. So whether that's, you know, someone mentioned a spittle bug that eats a weed, sure. It's, in that case, it's eating a weed, so that could actually be a good thing. It happens to be a pest for the sugarcane industry. We do track sugarcane aphid. So as long as there's a management reason why you're looking at it, it greatly expands out some of what EDDMapS tries to look at. It's why that one email I pulled up earlier, we typically are not that concerned about brand for a lot of what we do. Ag Pest Monitor is EDDMapS just for ag. Because, as I'm sure you all know, people sometimes get weird about, well, the project's called this. I don't know that I can contribute to it because I don't identify with that name. Okay, that's fine. We're just trying to help manage everything in the background.
So Matthew asked about native species reporting apps. I don't know of many that have been around for long enough to recommend, because a lot of apps and websites and databases, you know, they get that seed money and they do really well for that 4 years, 5 years, but then they don't get any follow-up money. And so then it kind of just tapers off over time and doesn't exist 10 years later. So the only thing that I can think of, and it has its good points and its bad points, but you can use something like iNaturalist. You can create their version of a project. You can do different things. The thing you run into with iNaturalist is you can have these user created fields for a project. You can create your own fields for that project, but they're not standardized in any way. So if you go to iNaturalist and you see all the different fields that different projects have created, you see 10 different ways that people are using to document something like density. So it's been around for quite a while. It's probably going to be around for a while longer, but I don't know about that aspect if you're trying to have standardized data.
And we do love the folks at iNaturalist. They are some of the most open and sharing folks. They're willing to collaborate. It's been great. They're a wonderful partner we've had for exchanging data between the systems and providing follow-up. So I've had some projects folks have been talking about trying to track pollinators, not pests. Bees going to flowers, good stuff. I frequently have been saying, what are your users already, your master gardeners, your other folks already using? If they're already using iNaturalist, it may be easier in some cases to reach out to them and go that way. And it's got a broad enough biodiversity scope and community scope that it makes sense. If you're trying to get into management and marking things eradicated and following up on things and doing treatments, that's where things like EDDMapS come in. So it's a good balance just to help out. You know, we're all in this together. And it's fortunate that most of the platforms out there are realize that and are willing to work with us. And we're happy to work with them. That's why we make the data that's been verified available. And for those cases where unverified data should be given to certain groups, we provide the security and the ability to do that. Double entry of data is silly. We have computers. We can do this. It's just a matter of getting people to agree that we can share data and then just make the technology happen.
And you brought up the point about coming back to an existing record, and that reminded me, as far as I'm aware, iNaturalist does not have the ability for you to revisit a record to tie a location's species history all together. So that might be a barrier to using iNaturalist. Like I said, iNaturalist is great for so many things. It's really great for getting people engaged and involved. But for repeated measures at a location, and you want to tie those repeated measures all together, I don't know if there's a way to do that through iNaturalist, and I just don't know of another system where you can do it in the same way that you can with something like EDDMapS.
And one of the things that we, we're pushing an hour, and so we can definitely wrap up if folks need to go on to other stuff, go ahead. But we also are doing this time period, so if there are other general EDDMapS questions, that can be part of this as well. The goal was to have a topic when we do this each month, but then also make it where if the audience has other questions about EDDMapS or really focused on EDDMapS or the apps, then we can answer those questions as well. So just to throw that out there, the questions don't have to be just focused on this project concept, but at the same time, if there's no other questions, we're glad to give you back the rest of your day.
And you could always ask a real doozy of a question, in which case that could be the next office hours.
And the plan is to do these monthly on the third Friday of the month at the same time period. So.
And we will be sending out those emails to people who want to receive emails from us with the notification of, hey, this is the next webinar. And we are also putting the links to these training sessions, on a monthly basis on our training page of the EDDMapS Tools and Training section.
How far you want to go here, Chuck? I can keep answering questions that pop up. I mean, there are people in the room.
Well, I did see the question about someone, and I wanted to ask about how to make someone an expert. I guess that's in the context of, presumably in the context of EDDMapS, that's where that question is. And let's answer that, and then we can wrap up if there's no other questions.
So making someone an expert's a piece of cake if you have the permission to make someone an expert. It's, again, typically where experts came in. Verifiers were going through records, and at some point the verifier goes, bless it, Rebecca keeps reporting kudzu bug. I know Rebecca knows what kudzu bug looks like. I would like to stop having to verify Rebecca's records every single time she sends a record, because she knows what she's doing. So for adding someone as an expert, it is as simple as saying, all right, Rebecca Wallace, whenever she reports in the United States, and I'm going to limit it to Georgia just because I'm the Georgia verifier, and the Alabama folks might get a little upset. They're sometimes touchy. And whenever she reports, and it has to be a subject that your project's currently dealing with, here's how long I want you to wait before that record is verified. So I'm going to say 0. It'll be instant. She reports, it's up and publicly available. And I'm going to say her data is verified. If I submit this, if she reports data, in this case, spotted lanternfly, the record will be up and available. It's a tool to help keep experts from causing problems. There's a lot of controversy about experts because some folks go, all right, Rebecca knows what she's talking about, but she's still human, last we checked. So she could make a mistake. And for something like spotted lanternfly, if I suddenly have a new county record for spotted lanternfly, and it's because Rebecca sneezed while using the smartphone and hit spotted lanternfly and submitted the record by accident, did I just cause a regulatory incident and a whole bunch of press and things I'm going to have to now deal with for the next several weeks? Or do I want to take the time to verify every single record that comes in? That's why we let the people at that verifier level say, if some of this gets out, I know who's going to have to answer for it. The fun thing we do, because I'm all about accountability. Every time Rebecca's record gets verified automatically, it has the person who said she was an expert listed on the record as the person that reviewed the record. So an expert really at setting up automated review, more so than just, oh, Rebecca reported. Why is her record public and reviewed? I don't know. No, we know. We absolutely have the person who said her record should go through. So we never have a question about how did this piece of data show up on a map?
And that verification delay, that is a good feature to allow verifiers to at least see the records that are coming in from this particular person and fitting these other parameters, so that if that accident does happen, then there's a chance of catching it before it becomes publicly available.
So the short answer, first of all, become a verifier. Second of all, add someone as an expert because you're tired of verifying their record.
And I think you mentioned this, Joe, but this is something that us as system admins have to turn on a case-by-case basis for projects.
Correct. Same with the managed verifiers, which the form looks extremely similar. Adding people isn't the problem. It's making sure that we have them vetted ahead of time and that all the verifiers for an area are on the same page. So no one gets the surprise of something showing up and wondering why. I mean, even the state plant regulatory officers tend to be pretty darn friendly after you get to know them, as long as you never surprise them. Because there are severe consequences if you surprise a regulatory officer. It doesn't go well for anyone involved.
All right. Well, thank y'all very much. And like we said, we will do this again next month, and this recording will be available on the EDDMapS tools and training page.
Take care. Have a good weekend.
Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again.